Good afternoon, good evening. Is this on? Can you hear me? All right. It's been a while since I've been here. The last time I came was the 65th anniversary of Kurosawa, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's quite a feat. That Mr. Kurosawa started the business now over 70 years ago. Started as a classical guitar builder. So that's how I'm going to start the talk. So if you want to.
That's perfect.
All right. So back when my great-great-great-grandfather began to build guitars, they were all gut string. There was no such thing as a steel string for a guitar. He gets a job in Vienna, Austria, and works with a gentleman named Johann Stauffer. And you may have seen pictures of Stauffer guitars, right? And Craig and I joke, the thing that we think is the funniest about the Stauffer guitar is the headstock. Because we are convinced that Paul Bigsby was inspired by the Stauffer headstock, and then he inspired Leo Fender to make the Fender headstock look like a Stauffer headstock. Goes to Vienna at age 15. He's 15 years old, and he moves from Germany to Vienna. His father drops him off, goes back to Germany, and he apprenticed with Mr. Stauffer for several years and learned not only how to build guitars, but he learned how to help manage a guitar-making enterprise. Goes back to Germany briefly, very briefly, and decides to come to the New World, to come to America, to seek fame and fortune. And so last November, right? Mm-hmm. Last November, Craig and I and a bunch of my colleagues at work, on November 6th, we went to New York City because it's a block-long office building today. But back in the 1800s, it was individual stores, and upstairs you could live. And so they rented a property at 196 Hudson Street. And for our 175th anniversary, the company that owns the building, the David Yurman Jewelry business, they helped design a bronze plaque that's on the side of the building. So on November 6th last year, we went into New York and we all stood by the plaque and had our pictures taken because that was the 190th anniversary of my family coming to America. So immigrants are coming to America, and the advantage, of course, of the acoustic guitar is it's portable. And so they would buy a Martin guitar, and then they would go somewhere else. They probably would not stay in New York City. So now you have to trust me on this part of the story, because I'm not making it up, but I'm making it up because of all the research I've done through my entire career, trying to figure out something that happened in New York. And it's like, well, why did that happen? What we do know is he made Stauffer copy guitars for a few years and then transitioned and stopped making that Fender headstock guitar and started making a guitar that looked like this. And so my conclusion is that this is what people pictured in their mind. When you said guitar back in the 1800s, they thought of a guitar from Spain. They didn't think of a guitar from Vienna. And I feel comfortable holding this Yamaha guitar because my good friend Tom Sumner, who is the president of Yamaha USA, is the chairman of NAMM, and I was the chairman of NAMM, so we have something in common. So when you talk to Spanish guitar builders, they never put their name on the headstock. And even early Martin guitars didn't have the name, they would have a stamp on the back. But what I think is cool about the Martin guitar, and I think it's because CF was German and not Spanish, the Spanish builders, what they would do up here, they would make it a little different so that that would be a feature that you would recognize. Oh, that's Mr. Ramirez's headstock. That's Mr. So-and-so's headstock. Fortunately, I think for us, he went with just a rectangular headstock, and that's an enduring feature of a Martin guitar. It doesn't have all this fancy work up on the top. And the other thing that was happening, so here's a Martin guitar that sort of looks like a classic guitar, right? Slot head, wide fingerboard, 12 fret, got that beautiful shape that you would associate with a classic guitar. The other thing that happened was that classic guitars traditionally have what's called fan bracing. the braces fan out like this. And that works great. If you're going to tie the strings on the bridge, right? Works great. But it did not work great if you were using a pin bridge. And I've seen pictures of the guitars that he built with the fan bracing, with the pins. And if everything wasn't perfectly aligned, when you went to drill the hole, you could drill right through the brace. And then you have to start all over. So when you look at the transition from fan to X, it didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually. He had to move the braces out of the way. And then he's like, well, if I'm moving them out of the way, why don't I just do it like this? And so he invented this bracing that we still use, that most of our competitors also still use.
Konnichiwa. So I want to let the folks know that the 12-fret slot head has a very unique sound, very open sound.
Is that your microphone or
No.
Stores? It sounds good.
This is the Stores.
Yeah. So along comes CF Jr., and he joins the business. And in family businesses, when you study family businesses, there's kind of a rhythm that people who study it say, if you follow this rhythm, you have a better chance of success. And so the rhythm for the second generation in a family business is often, don't mess with the sauce. Mom came up with a good idea, maybe in the kitchen. Dad came up with a good idea, maybe in the garage. And the second generation can just carry on and not radically change it. And that's what CF Jr. did. He carried on. The guitars were getting a little bigger, but he didn't really change a lot in terms of the design. So then Frank Henry comes along. And again, when you study family businesses, it's often at the third generation that the wheels can come off the bus. Because the third generation, they get a little cocky and they think, oh, this is easy. Or they don't even want to work very hard. They just think that the business will run itself. Fortunately, for me and my family, third generation Frank Henry Martin was an entrepreneur. So he was looking around for opportunity, and he recognized that an instrument, kind of an odd duck, I saw one though, I should have, in one of the other stores. He got in the business of making mandolins, but they were the bowl-back mandolins. And I think they're still a little popular here in Japan, the bowl-back mandolin.
Yes,
A little
people
popular.
know that.
Yeah. And then of course it got redesigned with a flat or a carved back. So that was his first foray into something other than the guitar. And did that was good business all the way from the late 1800s, right up until the late 1920s, and then the Great Depression, and that business went away. And of course the mandolin had metal strings, but the guitars, everybody's guitars at that point still had gut strings. The other instrument that he thought he could capitalize on was the ukulele. The ukulele was becoming popular in the mainland of US. Americans were going to Hawaii on vacation. They became enamored with the music. And so he said, we're going to get into the ukulele business. And in the first year was 1915. Could have been 1914, close enough. The first year, in 1915, we made 15 ukuleles. 9 years later, we had to put an addition on the factory to accommodate the demand for ukuleles. And in 1924, we made 14,000 ukuleles. You want to play one?
Sure. So this is a tenor ukulele. So this would be soprano. This is the tenor. I don't want you, but I guess I need you. You've got me in between the devil and a deep blue sea. I don't love you, but I guess I need you. You've got me in between the devil and a deep blue sea. The Beatles, John, Paul, and George all played a lot of ukuleles.
So the ukulele continues to be popular. We make more, people get into the business, there's builders in Honolulu making them. And Hawaiian music becomes pop music. People they became enamored with the sound. It was fun, the economy was good, everyone was having a good time. And so I've done some research recently. It's like, okay, but Hawaiian music wasn't just the ukulele. There was a guitar. How did the guitar get incorporated into the Hawaiian music thing? So the research I did, we have a factory in Mexico. In fact, we were just down there 2 weeks ago. It's the 35th anniversary of us starting that factory. And it's in Sonora. So if you picture like Phoenix, Arizona, or Tucson, you go south of there and it's mountainous and it's desert. And I when we were in Phoenix, I went to a museum and they had photographs of cowboys in these mountains in Sonora, and they were rustling cattle. That's what they did for a living. They raised cattle and then they sold them to be slaughtered so people could eat them. And so the research I've done said that the ukulele ended up in Hawaii because of the Portuguese. Portuguese came to Hawaii to work in the sugarcane field. And some of them didn't want to do the work, so they said, why don't we make this Portuguese instrument for our friends who live here in Hawaii? And they started with the machete, and that evolved into the ukulele. So that's the origin of the ukulele, is it's the Portuguese trying to make folk instruments, so in the evening after they were in the cane fields, they could entertain themselves. So the sugar was destined to go to the west coast of the US, California, Oregon, Washington. There was a gold rush, so there were a lot of people that were making money. The Transcontinental Railroad was put in place, so people were coming from back east to just go out west and see if they could, again, find fame and fortune. So the other thing that they were doing commercially in Hawaii, besides sugarcane, was raise cattle. Lots of land. This is before tourism, before Waikiki. Tons of land, particularly on the Big Island. Still, there's big ranches still on the Big Island. And so they go there, and the native Hawaiians, they did not want to work in the cane fields, and they did not want to rustle cattle. They wanted to live the life that they were living before the white people came to Hawaii. So the entrepreneurs that had these ranches needed people to rustle the cattle. They went to Sonora in Mexico and hired Mexican cowboys known as vaqueros. And the vaqueros picked up their families and moved to Hawaii to make more money working on these cattle ranches. And the vaqueros brought guitars with them. And then the native Hawaiians incorporated not only the ukulele, but the guitar into their music. Started with a lap guitar, with slack key, and steel strings, and eventually it became the guitar that you play, like this. So we're thinking, okay, what can we do to capitalize on this interest in this music that's coming out of Hawaii? So we begin to put steel strings on the guitar, and it was also influenced by Andre Segovia. And we're chasing a market. We're trying to figure out, we're moving away from the classic guitar with gut strings into a more modern guitar. We're not really sure where it's going. And we weren't the only people chasing the market. So was Gibson. They saw that people wanted to buy guitars with metal strings to play Hawaiian music. So they started to make copies of Martin guitars because they were looking at the Dreadnought going, that's a guitar we need to copy. The Martin Dreadnought guitar originated in 1916, but it was like a classic guitar. It had a slot head, it had a wide fingerboard, the body was 12 fret, and it was only sold through our distributor, Ditson. It didn't even say Martin. The original Dreadnought guitars were not branded Martin, they were branded Ditson. Unfortunately, when the Depression came, Ditson went bankrupt. And the Dreadnought wasn't selling very well because it was such a big guitar, people didn't know what to make of it. Fortunately, even though it wasn't selling well, we decided to keep it in the line and we put our name on it. And it still didn't sell very well. You haven't played a guitar in a while.
No. Should we play it?
Play this one.
A single low.
これ事前にどのギターを弾くかというのはほとんど決めてなくてですね、今クリスさんがピックしたものをクレイグさんにお渡ししてこれを弾いてほしいという感じです。
This is a single low 18. So in the 1800s, guitar bodies were small. The guitars were mostly played by women, so they found the smaller guitars were easier to play. The parlor guitars, right. So you'll hear a very balanced and even sound from the sixth string to the first, or vice versa. It's very balanced all the way across.
So we're doing the single O, we're doing the double O, the triple O, the Dreadnought, and Gibson's jealous. All right, what can we do? They had their archtop guitars, this is before electric guitars. what can we do to compete with Martin? So one of the models they came out with was the L00. And there was a point in time that Gibson wasn't making the L00 recently. Or if they were, they weren't making them in any significant quantity. And I saw an L00 somewhere. I said, that's just a really charming shape. And so I convinced my colleagues, and it's not cheap to change the shape in a factory, right? It's one thing if you've been making the same shape for 100 years, but if it's a new shape, we actually have a process. Now I can put my thumb on the scale because I'm Mr. Martin, but it's expensive. So everyone's like, oh, I hope this works, I don't know. So the CEO 7, is this one ready to play?
That's ready to play.
So the CEO 7 is a copy of a Gibson L00, and the Gibson L00 was a copy of a Martin 00. So this is a Martin copy of a Gibson copy of a Martin. So I like auctions, and I go to auctions, and now they're on the internet, so that's really dangerous. And there's an auction gallery near Craig and I, and there's a gentleman there, and people, as they get older, they may want to get rid of some of their instruments, and so periodically they'll do a musical instrument auction, and I always pay attention, and I'll ping Craig and say, hey, you should go on the Al Durfers auction, there's some cool stuff. So I was looking at this auction, and I'm looking at this guitar, I'm going, what is that thing? What on earth is that? And so I did a little research, and it was a Gibson HG20. What is that? It had F-holes, kind of a flat top guitar, but it had F-holes, and it had a little sound hole. It was set up for lap style playing, and it had a sound baffle in it. It was really expensive, and they didn't sell very well, and they discontinued them. So they had the HG20, which I bought. It was a mess. The guitar I bought was a mess. And then they had the HG22, which was a little fancier. And then they had the HG24. So the guitars with the F-holes with the baffle were a failure. People didn't buy them. They were way too expensive. But Gibson said with the HG24, with the bigger body, like we did with like the Dreadnought, let's keep it in the line, but let's convert it to a flat top. And there are some of those guitars downstairs. It's the Gibson J series, still in the line. So I bring it to work, and Tim in R&D, he goes, well, that's a mess. I go, yeah, yes. It's have you seen the one I bought? No, it's a mess.
I didn't see that.
But I said, Tim, we should make a flat top version of that just to see. He goes, oh, you know, that's expensive and it's time consuming. We already have the LOO. I said, Tim, whose name's on the building? He goes, yours it is. So we made one. Took a while. And right after the NAMM show, he came up to my office and he said, and he's smiling. He goes, it's done. I said, what do you think? He said, I think it works. And so we took this guitar to Phoenix. We gave a talk about acoustic roots, showed it there. We gave a talk at the MIM Museum, and if you're ever in Phoenix, Arizona, you have to go to the MIM Museum. It's unbelievable. And then it went home. And so this is the first time outside of Arizona that anyone other than my colleagues at the factory has seen this guitar. And so what I liked about it, you're gonna get to play it in a minute, was it looks kind of like a Dreadnought. But it's got a little slope shoulder thing going with it, so it's a little sexier, I think. And it's 14 fret. It's not a 12 fret
really
guitar.
beautiful.
It's a slope shoulder with 14 frets, with a flat top, not the F-holes with the baffle. And because that HG, HG stood for Hawaiian guitar, we decided that to make it out of koa, and we're going to make it in the style of a 28. So when we introduce the guitar this fall, this guitar will be called an HG 28.
Beautiful. It's very light. Very light. That means it's light. Can't buy this one yet though.
So this is
Fun guitar to play.
So one of your favorite, because you play electric guitar,
Mhm.
but when you play electric, you stand up,
Yes, sir.
right? But when you play acoustic, you often sit.
Yes.
So you like the triple O.
I like the triple O because of the comfort.
So which triple O do you want to play?
Well, we could do the triple O 28 right there.
Okay.
With it says E on it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So here we are, Martin and Gibson, we're chasing this Hawaiian music thing, and we're making guitars to appeal to musicians that were playing Hawaiian music with steel strings, and then Hawaiian music goes out of fashion. But fortunately, country artists understood how significant adding steel strings and a 14-fret neck to a flat-top guitar was. And you think back then, if you're a touring group, 2-3 people, you're out on the road, you know, singing and playing instruments, you might have had a vocal mic.
That's about it.
But you did not have one of these. There was nothing like that for the guitar. The guitar was the amplifier. And so the steel strings pushed the sound to the back of the room. And many country artists played the triple O until they realized not only the sound, but the look of the dreadnought has a real presence to it. And particularly now they're standing up, right? They're performing, they're not sitting. And often, you know, with a lot of moving around, vaudeville stuff, and they were real entertainers. So we should play a dreadnought now, right?
Absolutely.
Which one?
We can do the regular one if you'd like. Or
This one? Okay.
Sure.
So when you talk to guitar historians, they often refer to that point in time from, say, late 1920s until World War II as a golden era for Martin guitars. And what they mean by that is it was that point at which the Martin guitar became a modern guitar. That you could play contemporary country music on it, you could get a big sound out of it, it was durable, it was good, pretty good value. Martin guitars were never cheap, but when you think about how well they work and how long they last, I think they're still a good investment. And so my grandfather now is helping his father run the business, carries it through till 1955 when I'm born. And my father needed a job because he got married and had a kid. So he joins the business in 1955, and that was really the beginning of the folk music boom. Early in the folk boom, they often played smaller body guitars. It wasn't until later, right, early 60s and mid and late 60s that the dreadnought became more predominant. But so let's play a double O, because double O's were really popular during the folk boom.
So this is a double O, and it's a 28. 28 means rosewood. Double O is the body size. So as we go from a single O, it's a little smaller, double O, a little larger, triple O, a little larger yet, but they all maintain the same depth here, which is less than a dreadnought.
Well, there ain't no use sitting wondering why, babe. You don't go by that. Oh, there ain't no use sit and wonder why. You'll never do somehow when you rooster crows at the break of dawn. You look out your window, see that I have gone. You're the reason I must be moving on. Don't think twice, it's alright. Don't think twice, it's alright. Thank you, Arigato.
Thank you. So business was really good in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and my father convinced my grandfather that the old factory was obsolete, and we needed a new factory to just deal with the folk music boom. So we began construction in 1963. I'm reading a good book about George Harrison. And 1963 was quite a year for the Beatles,
very
right?
good year.
But my family didn't even think about the Beatles. They were thinking about Woody Guthrie, right? And Kingston Trio.
Kingston Trio.
And then we opened the factory in 1964. And the other thing that happened in 1964 is something called the British invasion. So the Beatles come to America, and then Americans go to Great Britain to study skiffle and the Celtic music, and the British rockers come to America to study blues, and then the Beatles played skiffle, which was an acoustic style of music, and we just couldn't keep up. When folk music and rock and roll collided, it was an unbelievable time for my family's business, really unbelievable. So we should play another Dreadnought, right?
Sure.
Because now we're in folk rock,
Yeah.
which is the music we grew up on.
Yeah, how about there's a D35 over
Okay.
there, right behind, I think.
The Johnny Cash, or
Yeah,
is
the
there another one?
Johnny Cash we could do if you
Right.
like. We'll do 2 songs with this one if that's okay. What will you do when you get lonely? Nobody waiting by your side. You've been running hard and much too long. Guess it's just your foolish pride. Hey, love, you've got me on my knees, hey, love. Oh, I'm begging, darling, please, hey, love. Darling, won't you ease my worried mind? This is an Eric Clapton Piccolo 42. We're gonna, is it okay if we just do a short
Yeah.
little burst? Yeah.
So business was good all through the 70s. My dad bought the Darko String Company, which was a brilliant move. So today's April 1st. This is not an April Fool's joke.
No joke.
50 years ago today was the day I was hired by my family's business. By the late 1970s, the folk rock thing had kind of played itself out. The Eagles were sort of the last significant folk rock band, and then disco came along, the Yamaha DX7, and hair metal. So if you were in the business of making pointy electric guitars in the 1980s, things were okay. But if you were in the business of making acoustic guitars in the 1980s, things were tough. And my dad retired and moved to Florida. My grandfather reasserted himself briefly, then he passed away, and 36 years ago, I was put in charge of the company. So business was tough. Okay, that's what it is what it is, right? And we carried on, and all of a sudden, something called MTV Unplugged happened. Thank goodness. So that was my first guitar boom, and we had to expand the business. We began to embrace more technology. We've ridden that actually for quite a while. We recently had the COVID-induced guitar boom. That no one anticipated that happening. Where am I going with this? So, the backpacker. Here's a funny story about the backpacker. So I come across it at a folk festival. And I won't tell you all the story, but the fellow that was building it was buying reject Martin guitar parts. And I'm like, well, I could do that. He said, well, you probably shouldn't because I have a design patent. So we formed a partnership. And my colleagues, they thought it was a funny, like quirky little stupid thing. And they humored me. They said, all right, Chris wants to make some of these in Mexico. So we'll make really cheap tooling because if we're lucky, we'll sell 5,000 of them. And so last year we made backpacker number 300,000. I love our tradition. I love rosewood. I love mahogany. I love jet black ebony. There's a reason these woods are called rare exotic timbers, and they're becoming more so. So I've been a big proponent of alternatives. You know, the X series is an alternative guitar. It's wood. It's just wood that's been manipulated by man. The new Inception series is something different from us. And I know sometimes it's like, no, Martin should never change. But the story I just told you, had we never changed, the Dreadnought wouldn't exist, right? We'd still be making like Stauffer guitars. So you have electric guitars, right?
Yes.
And they all have cutaways.
Yes, they do.
And they're pretty easy to play because there's no heel
Right.
to speak of.
Right, you get up above the 12th fret, nice and...
So the big challenge with an acoustic guitar with a cutaway is that the heel on the neck is in the way. And everyone's like, is it just there because it looks good? Because it's very difficult to play an acoustic guitar with a cutaway when you've got the heel in the way.
Okay, so if you already have a D18 and you already have a D28, there are a lot of other options you can add to your collection. This is one of them, the SC13. such a wonderful selection of Martin guitars here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this was a fun project. I thought it would be appropriate to celebrate our 190th anniversary by reissuing the D19. The D19 was designed to be a little bit of an upgrade from a D18, and the idea was to utilize guitar tops that had some cosmetic issues, not structural. So we stained the top. In my opinion, we picked the wrong stain, and it was a weird look, and it didn't sell very well. But I thought, okay, now that we have the Mamaki printer, we can do a better job. So we had a pile of Adirondack spruce tops that were cosmetically challenged. So we took a digital photograph of a flamed mahogany piece of wood that we had in the factory, digitized that, and printed a flamed mahogany look on an Adirondack spruce top. So some of you may say blasphemy. I say creativity.
You could hardly, you'd be hard pressed, or it's very difficult to see that that is not the actual physical grain.
And I think this is the third generation of a Mamaki printer, and every time the technology just gets better and better and better.
Thank you so much. Yeah, very light, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really lightweight.
Let's do one more and then we'll call it. Good, do one more and then we'll call it.
Oh, okay. One more. On this one?
My dear friend, fantastic.
Mr. Chris Martin.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. It's been great. We'll be here if you have any questions or whatever. Thanks again. Thanks so much.